I'm Joelle Wellington. The end of the school year is always a very chaotic time. With final exams and multiple obligations to complete and fulfill before the school year is over, it's really hard to focus on the next year, especially concerning the issue of textbooks. The Textbook Authority is a textbook resale company that buys used textbooks and resells to consumers, typically underclassmen. What makes the Textbook Authority so unique is its bundling factor, with 4 textbooks being our base product. The bundles are tailored to a student's individual schedule, making life easier and less stressful. Now, before I get into my mission statement, I want to tell you about how the Textbook Authority came to be. When I first entered my school, Packer Collegiate Institute, 4 years ago, I knew it was a great opportunity. However, with great opportunities, there are often great drawbacks. And that came in the form of textbooks. When I entered my freshman year, even though I only bought used books and rented textbooks, the costs came up to over $300. And it was a struggle for my mother as she's a single parent of both me and my sister. And so the Textbook Authority came to be when I thought about not only helping my own family, but families that are in the same situation as my own. So in short, the Textbook Authority's mission is to make the lives of students easier and textbooks more affordable. I'm an online service business that can be accessed through Facebook, and I serve as a broker between the sellers of used textbooks and buyers. I chose the legal structure of a sole proprietorship, not only because it keeps labor costs low, but because in the beginning, before I can expand, I'd like to have sole control of what is going on with my company and how it's happening. I believe I'm qualified to run this business, not only because I'm part of that student consumer market of my school, but because I'm very familiar with the needs and wants of the student consumers, as I'm friends with a lot of them. My target market can actually be separated into 2 groups, those that are affluent and those that are lesser so. However, after conducting surveys, I found that even the affluent community of my school would be interested in buying used textbooks. The students at Packer Collegiate Institute are between the ages of 13 and 18, and they come from households with middle to upper income. They typically live in Brooklyn Heights and Manhattan, and they prefer a calm atmosphere in the end of the year when surrounded by multiple obligations such as exams. They're impulsive but frugal buyers that like extra money in their pocket. Now, my 2 competitors are MBS Direct and Follett, which are 2 other textbook companies. However, the price for 4 textbooks often costs more than $200. But they're very efficient, not only in delivery, but the website themselves. They're online and on campus, but they have low penetration with the community. Often, children don't even know that they can resell textbooks, and when they do, they don't often get much money back in return. However, MBS Direct has a long-standing relationship with boarding schools primarily, and Follett has a long-standing relationship specifically with my school. But the Textbook Authority has bundles tailored to a student's schedule, and I'm familiar with my student consumer, making me an expert in this area. As I stated before, I'm targeting high school students, and I'm selling used textbooks with my base product being 4 textbooks. Used in this sense is defined by the Textbook Authority as gently handled textbooks. However, this means that However, I do accept textbooks with annotated page at a lower rate of $15, while textbooks that are not annotated in will be bought for $20. I'm based online and at Packer Collegiate, as I said, and I'm a seasonal business running from May to September, when I would start buying textbooks in May and selling all the way into the second week of September. For my 4 texts, as I stated before, my base product is 4 textbooks for $120. Those smaller bundles are available, though the price per book does rise as bundles grow smaller. To promote my business, I would use social media, in-school promotion, and make use of grassroots. To promote my business via advertising, I would use the school newspaper, which has offered me free advertising. There are also bi-weekly meetings that allow me to promote my business through a few announcements before the launch of the actual business, to get people excited and to inform people about what my business is all about. I would solicit and make announcements at club meetings and such. Also, I would also talk to the student council during their meetings to promote my business. They're very influential in the community, and word of mouth referrals will go a long way in this particular part of my promotion plan. I would also speak to the Parents Association and write a small piece for the Parents Newsletter, so parents would get excited about this program and they would encourage their children to take part as well. Now, the total material cost per unit is $80.82. As I said before, textbooks that are not annotated in would be bought for $20. I would not be paying myself any labor costs, instead taking a stipend. For my selling price, again, it's $120, and my contribution margin would then be $39.18. For my stipend, I would take an average $67, and my rent monthly is $70. My annual expense for my stipend is $804, and my rent is $840, making my total annual fixed expenses $1,644. For my monthly sales projection for the first year, I anticipate selling 216 units, with a spike being in August because after surveys I've conducted, I found that most students bought their books in August. As I stated before, my selling price is $120, so the total sales for the first year should be $26,000, though my variable expenses are rather large, at $18,000. After taking out fixed operating expenses and taxes, my net profit would be approximately $6,000. My startup investment is $1,790, with my emergency fund being rather conservative because I don't anticipate many emergencies occurring within the first year. My ROS is 20.44%, with my dollar equivalent being 20 cents, and my ROI is 324%, with my dollar equivalent being $3.24 for every dollar that I invest in my business. As a small business, I have a responsibility to both my customers and the environment. After collecting third generation books, I would then collect the books from students and actually recycle them for them. And also, as an avid supporter of environmental health and protection, I would donate 5% of my annual profits to the National Resource Defense Council. For my short-term business goals, I would make announcements and get people excited about the business, as launch isn't until May. For my long-term business goals, I would like to expand through other private schools in the New York area and colleges. Incidentally, there's a college across the street from my school by the name of St. Francis, where I would like to start my expansion for colleges. I could also expand all over the country, especially through colleges, both private and state. For my personal short-term goals, I would attend further entrepreneurship classes to get a more in-depth grasp of what being an entrepreneur actually means. For my long-term personal goals, I plan to run my business through the rest of my high school career, and I'd like to establish myself at the college I attend. This business requires working with other people, and this only prepares me for the workplace where that is expected of me. Thank you for your consideration from the Textbook Authority. Let there be textbooks.